everyone, welcome back to another fun-filled lesson of Jennifer Actual Speaking. My name is, of course, Jennifer Clyde. It is time for Unit 35 already, so in today's lesson, we'll be talking about the different types of homes. So it's quite simple. Of course, we know the different types of homes. The most simple ones are perhaps apartments, houses. There are what we call villas as well, studio apartments and office towers and so on in Korea. And as we all talk about what kinds of houses we live in, I'm sure you all have no hardships, no difficulties talking about how many rooms there are, if there is a kitchen, a living room, bathroom, and so on. So we'll focus on the different types of houses or homes, and also we'll briefly talk about your dream house as well. Now, when it comes to my dream house, I've always lived in an apartment building ever since I was little. Ever since I was a little baby. So it is my dream to someday live in a house, a big house, a very spacious house with perhaps a front yard and a backyard. A garden would be nice as well. I would like to have dogs and lots of children running around in the yard having fun. Okay, so that's about it for our intro to today's lesson. Then let's begin. Okay, everyone, are you ready for the warm-up segment? As always, we are going to begin with our brainstorming cues. You know what to do? Well, of course, practice asking ourselves the 5 W and how questions. You all know why we do this, right? There is no particular, reason for this, or there is no particular rule for this, but it's just to train your brain, to train yourself as to asking questions about what you could possibly talk about. So once again, today we're talking about the types of homes, right? So the first W question would be who. So who do you live with? Ask yourself these questions because these questions will help you speak more fluently and freely and comfortably about whatever topic it is. So who do you live with? Do you live with your family, your friends, alone? So think about that. Let's move on to our what question, the next W question. So what kind of home do you live in? That's a simple question, right? Apartment, studio, one-bedroom apartment, a house, a villa, and so on. So what does your house look like? So when you're talking about the house that you live in, you could perhaps add details. Talk about what the house looks like, okay? And another what question is, what is your dream house? I did tell you a bit about what kind of house or home I would like to live in, but my dream house would be a house on the beach, like a beach house. With lots of windows, large windows, and I would like it to be, elaborately decorated with wonderful furniture and so on. So that would be my dream house. So think about what your dream house is. Moving on to the next question, what don't you like about your place? So what I don't like about my place is that it is an apartment. I told you I would love to live in a house. So I could say, well, what I don't like about the house that I live in right now is that it is an apartment. I could also add there isn't enough parking space and so on. So think about what you don't like about your place. Place meaning not location, but place also means house. Okay, the place where you live. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, let's move on to when. Now, when did you move into your current home? Okay, we move, right? Move from one house to another. Now, when you are moving to a new home, you move into. Even in Korean, we say 이사 들어가다, right? 이사 나가다 would be move out of something, okay? So when did you move into your current home? The house that you live in right now? And also, where would you like to move or move to? Perhaps you can talk about a country, a neighborhood, and so on and so forth. Also, where would you like to build your dream house? I told you my dream house, I would like to build it on a beach. So I would get a full view of the ocean. I love the ocean, so I would like to build my dream house on a beach. Think about where you would like to build your dream house. Moving on to why. Why do you prefer houses to apartments and vice versa? Okay, so if you like houses or if you like apartments, talk about why you prefer that specific type of home to other types of homes. And another how, our last how category, how long have you lived at or in your current home? So you can talk about how long, okay, you've lived in your current home. I could tell you about the house that I live in. I live in an apartment, and I have lived in the same apartment since 1990, I think. So it's been a long time. So think about when you moved into that place and talk about how long you've lived in that house or apartment. Also, how many rooms does your house or apartment have? So talk about the number of rooms you have in your place. All right, that is all for today's brainstorming cues. Do some more practice on your own, and let's move on to our next segment. It's time for Actual Talk.
You know, Peter, when I was younger, I was actually born and raised in the same house my entire life until recently when I moved to Korea. When I came to Korea, I moved already 3 times.
So you bounced around a lot.
I did. What about you, Peter? Did you move around from place to place?
When I was young, I lived in one house for many years,
Okay.
until 18 when I moved out, and then in my college years, I bounced around from this apartment to that many times.
Oh, okay. So what kind of housing situations were you in then?
Well, when I was young, we lived in a split level entry,
Mm-hmm.
just a traditional kind of suburban house.
Okay. What about now? Where do you live?
Now we just moved out to Ilsan,
Oh, okay.
so we're out in the sprawl with
Oh.
the big wide streets and the wide sidewalks and all that comfort.
Yeah. So,
So we're in a high-rise apartment.
oh, okay. Is it spacious or is it crowded?
It is spacious. It's my first spacious apartment in Korea.
Oh, you're so lucky. I used to live in an office tel and I shared it with my cousin. Yeah. So usually office tels are for one person, right? But because we were sharing.
Even then, it's small.
Right, exactly. So it was pretty crowded. And now I actually live in my own office tel and it's really spacious.
Okay.
Yeah, but the only problem with it is that it's so close to the main street that it's
It's
really
loud.
loud. It's very noisy.
Yeah,
But it
you've
is.
got to move then.
I know, but it's only a minute away from the subway. So it's
Okay,
actually
that's
really
convenient.
convenient. Yeah. But I don't know, what about the future? Now that you have kids, do you want to live maybe in a house or just stay in an apartment?
I really want them to have a yard.
Yeah.
And really, you can't find that too easily in Korea.
That's true. You know, in my childhood, I had a huge backyard. My parents still live there, and I had lots of memories in the backyard. It was a great place to play.
And a swing set and
And
everything.
a swing set and a garden. So I hope that in the future, when I have kids, I want a big house with a huge backyard.
Yeah, I'd like to have a yard, maybe even a forest behind it.
Yeah, that'd be beautiful.
Did you listen carefully? Now, to really simplify the conversation, to briefly summarize it, Peter said that he lived in one home until he was 18 for a long time, and then when he went to college, he moved from one place to another. So he moved around a lot. But what about Rachel? Rachel also said that she grew up in one house. She lived in the same house for a long time before she came to Korea. But ever since she moved to Korea, she has moved around a bit. So let's take a look at the conversation line by line. All right, Rachel says, I was born and raised in the same house. You could say this, you were born and raised in the same house. So, for example, if you have lived in the same house for a long time, ever since you were little, you can say, I was born and raised in the same house. In the same house my entire life until I moved to Korea. So she's saying until she came to Korea, she lived in the same house ever since she was a baby. Now, since coming to Korea, I've already moved 3 times. So she's moved around ever since she arrived in Korea. Now, Peter says, so you bounced around a lot. Now, what is bounce? We often bounce balls, for example, basketballs, we bounce or dribble basketballs, right? Okay, so it's bouncing up and down. There's movement, there's motion. So if you say bounce around, it means the same thing as move around, okay? You are moving from one place to another, okay? Bounce around. So Rachel says, yes, I did. I did bounce around a lot, move around a lot. And then she asks, did you move around from place to place? All right, keep this in mind, from place to place, from A to B, right? So she's asking, did you move around? Did you move from one place to another? And Peter says, when he was young, I lived in one house for many years until 18. So let's take a look. Live in one place for how long? Now he's saying that he's lived in one house until 18, but I did add that for you to help you understand. Of course, Peter did say, I lived in one house for many years until 18, meaning until the age of 18. Now, when I moved out, see, we've got it right here once again. As we were brainstorming, we talked about moving into a place. The opposite is to move out of a place, okay? 이사 나가다. So when he was 18, he moved out. He moved out. Then in my college years, I bounced around from this apartment to that. I bounced around from place to place, from this house to that house, okay? From this apartment to that, meaning that apartment. Many, many times he says. When I was young, we lived in a split level entry. Now, what is a split level entry? Split itself means to what? It means to divide, right? If I were to split this cue card in half, I would have to cut it in half. So you're splitting something, meaning separating it. But a split level entry is a type of home, okay? Where, for example, it's a two-story house and it has an entry in the middle, but not on the ground floor. It's somewhere between the first and the second floor. So you would walk in the entrance and perhaps a family would walk upstairs to their home and another family would walk downstairs to their home. That is a split level entry or a split level entry house, for example. And he says a traditional kind of suburban house. One thing I do want to point out here is, for example, Peter did say suburban. But some people think that it's a fancy way of saying suburban, but actually, if you look it up, there is no such word as suburban. The correct form is suburban. What is suburb or the suburbs? We're talking about an area just outside the city, okay, near the city. So if you see suburban house, you are talking about perhaps a residential area right outside of a city, okay, very crowded city. So he lived in that kind of house when he was young. And Rachel says, what about now? What about now? What kind of house do you live in now? And he said, we just moved out to. Now here, move out does not necessarily mean to move out of one place. Move out to somewhere, meaning you moved to a far place, okay? Moved out to a far place. So we're out in the sprawl with the big wide streets and the wide sidewalks and all that comfort. Let's take a look at the word sprawl, okay? Now, sprawl as a verb means to stretch out, okay? To stretch out or to widen, but he's using it here as a noun. So let's take a look. We are out in the sprawl. It's a noun. So if you say sprawl, you're talking about perhaps an area that is very city-like, okay? It's very urban, okay? Urban, city-like. So we're out in the sprawl with the big wide streets and the wide sidewalks and all that comfort. So we're in a high-rise apartment. Let's take a look at this. High-rise, okay? It's used together. A high-rise or a high-rise apartment is, simply put, a very tall building. So usually you can say, I live in a high-rise. If you perhaps live in an apartment that's more than 30 floors or more than 20 floors, that's definitely a high-rise. So it's a very tall building with elevators. So he lives in a very tall apartment. He lives in a high-rise apartment. Now Rachel asks, is it spacious or is it crowded? these are the very opposite, right? They have opposite meanings. Spacious comes from the word space, okay? So if you say a place is spacious, it means there is a lot of space, okay? It's large. There's a lot of space. Crowded is what? There's not enough space, right? So he says, it's my first spacious apartment in Korea. So he's lived in rather small apartments before, but now he lives in a spacious, meaning a big apartment. Now, Rachel says, you're so lucky. I used to live in an office tel. Now, we use the word office tel a lot in Korea. We'll be taking a look at this word later on, but I would say definitely try to use the word studio, especially if you are talking to a foreigner. They will understand that word, and they will not understand what an office tel is, okay? So if you by any chance live in an office tel, try not to say office tel to a foreigner. Try using the word studio or studio apartment. And she shared it, okay? She lived with someone else, with my cousins, with her cousin. It was pretty crowded, so what? Her place, or the office tel or studio, was not spacious. It was crowded. But now, I live in my own studio, and it's really spacious. So she lives on her own, in her own studio. Moving on, but she says the only problem with it is that it is so close to the main street. That's right, the main street meaning the main road, the very busy road, the busy street with all the cars and the buses and all that noise pollution. So she says it's very noisy. There's a lot of noise. And Peter says, you got to move then. You have to move then. She says, but it's only a minute away from the subway. It's only a minute away from something means that is how close it is to something. So for example, you can say if you walk to the subway from your house, it takes 5 minutes maybe. You can say it's only a 5-minute walk from the subway station, okay? But she says it's only a minute away from the subway, meaning it's very close to the subway station. She says it's convenient, and she asks, now, do you want to live in a house or just stay in an apartment? Now, Peter said, I really want them to have a yard. Now, she asked about Peter wanting to live in an apartment or a house because of the children, so he's talking about having a yard, and them would be his children, okay? His 2 little boys. Now, Rachel finishes off by saying, in my childhood, when I was young, when I was growing up, I had a huge backyard, okay? Backyard. A yard is a very spacious area outside of your home, but if you say backyard, you are talking about the outside area behind your house, in the back. If it's in the front, it's a front yard, okay? And she has lots of memories from the backyard or of being in the backyard. And she says it was a great place to play. Yeah, I think for children especially, that's one of the reasons why I would like to live in a house with a front and backyard, so children can run around and have fun and, of course, build memories in the house. All right, that is a wrap for today's actual talk. Listen to it one more time with the subtitles.
You know, Peter, when I was younger, I was actually born and raised in the same house my entire life until recently when I moved to Korea. When I came to Korea, I moved already 3 times.
Oh, so you bounced around a lot.
I did. What about you, Peter? Did you move around from place to place?
When I was young, I lived in one house for many years,
Okay.
until 18 when I moved out, and then in my college years, I bounced around from this apartment to that many times.
Oh, okay. So what kind of housing situations were you in then?
Well, when I was young, we lived in a split level entry, just a traditional kind of suburban house.
Okay. What about now? Where do you live?
Now we just moved out to Ilsan,
Oh, okay.
so we're out in the sprawl with
Oh.
the big wide streets and the wide sidewalks and all that comfort.
Yeah.
So we're in a high-rise apartment.
Oh, okay. Is it spacious or is it crowded?
It is spacious. It's my first spacious apartment in Korea.
Oh, you're so lucky. I used to live in an office tel and I shared it with my cousin. Yeah. So usually office tels are for one person, right? But because we were sharing,
Even then, it's small.
right, exactly. So it was pretty crowded. And now I actually live in my own office tel, and it's really spacious.
Okay.
Yeah, but the only problem with it is that it's so close to the main street that it's
It's
really
loud.
loud. It's very noisy.
Yeah,
But it
you've
is,
got to move then.
I know, but it's only a minute away from the subway. So it's
Okay,
actually
that's
really
convenient.
convenient. Yeah. But I don't know, what about the future? Now that you have kids, do you want to live maybe in a house or just stay in an apartment?
I really want them to have a yard.
Yeah.
And really, you can't find that too easily in Korea.
That's true. You know, in my childhood, I had a huge backyard. My parents still live there, and I had lots of memories in the backyard. It was a great place to play.
And a swing set and everything.
A swing set and a garden. So I hope that in the future, when I have kids, I want a big house with a huge backyard.
Yeah, I'd like to have a yard, maybe even a forest behind it.
Yeah, that'd be beautiful.
Welcome back, everyone. Now it's time for us to check out some great expressions when it comes to talking about types of homes, perhaps the type of house you live in. Now, briefly in the conversation, I did point out a word, office tel, remember? I said if you are especially talking to a foreigner, try not to say office tel, but say what? Studio, because they will understand. So some corrections you might want to make. Now, we often say, I live in a one room. 저 원룸에 살아요. What is a one room? It is a place with just one room, right? In English, we call it a studio or a studio apartment. So the next time you want to talk about a one room, as we call it in Korea, try saying I live in a studio or I live in a studio apartment, okay? Moving on to another one, 하숙집. Perhaps a lot of students in college, you may live in the school dormitory, but also at one of these 하숙집s, right? You can call it a lodging house. Now, lodge itself with an L-O-D-G-E, it means to rent, especially to rent a certain part of a home or a building or even a small space. But here, a lodging house is basically a house that you can rent, like a room you can rent. So you can call that a lodging house. Another one is 오피스텔. So to make that clear to you, as I said, a portmanteau, it is of an office and hotel. So basically, I'm saying that it is a combination, okay? It is a portmanteau of office and hotel. That's where this word actually comes from. But if you think about it, it is an office, but it's not exactly a hotel. I think it's closer to perhaps an office and residence, perhaps. But once again, call it a studio, not an office tel. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about types of homes, okay? Let's talk about your type of home, the house you live in. You can say, I live in a studio or an office tel. I live in a dormitory. I live in a house. We all know what a house is. And I live in an apartment where? In Seoul. So remember the pattern. I live in type of home, and then where? In Seoul, the area you live in, okay? Also, I live in a high-rise apartment. Remember, what is a high-rise? High-rise is a very tall building. Apartment would be a very tall apartment building with multi-stories, okay? Now, where? In the downtown, or in the Yongsan, or in the Bundang area. What is the difference? Okay, I live in, same, but this time we have in the. It's not just the or in, it's in the certain area, okay? So if you live in Seoul, you can say I live in Seoul, but if you want to talk about a particular area, you can say in the so-and-so area, okay? Downtown area, Bundang area, or Yongsan area. So talk about that neighborhood plus area. Moving on, I live in a small or a big apartment complex with 120 or 3,410 units. Now this is an example. I live in a small apartment complex. An apartment complex is an area of many apartments, of one type of apartment. For example, we call it 단지, 아파트 단지. In English, it is apartment complex. So I live in a small apartment complex with 120 units. Okay? We're talking about a group of things or people, and we're talking about families in this case, okay? So I live in a small apartment complex with about 120 families, 가구 in Korean, and if it's a large or big apartment complex, you can even have up to 3,410 units. So talk about whether it's big or small. I live on the 12th floor, okay? You're talking about the floor I live on, the 12th floor of a 25-story high-rise or apartment. A 25-story, what does this mean? We're not talking about a story we often tell children. We're talking about how tall the building is, how many floors the apartment building has. So if you live in an apartment with 12 floors, you would call it a 12-story apartment, okay? In this case, this apartment building has 25 floors, a 25-story high-rise or a 25-story apartment. Let's move on. I live in a 4-bedroom apartment. You all know that, a 4-bedroom. I live in a 2-story house. Once again, a story is how many levels? Floors. So I live in a 2-story house means I live in a house with 2 floors, with so-and-so, with my parents. I live in a house in the suburbs. Now, suburbs, once again, where is it? Right outside the city. Or I live in a house just outside of a certain area. Now, let's talk about your dream home, okay? One day, I hope to live in an upscale area. We're talking about your dream, your hope. So keep this pattern in mind. An upscale area would basically be a very wealthy area, okay? People that are well off, okay? So that is an upscale area. You can talk about wanting to live in a certain neighborhood. Also, I hope to live in a house with a large backyard. As I mentioned, a large backyard. Or, I've always wanted to live in a house in what? A secluded, means isolated, that's very quiet, that's away from all the busyness, or quiet, or even friendly neighborhood. So talk about the type of neighborhood you would like to move to by saying, I've always wanted to live in a house or an apartment in a certain neighborhood. I've always dreamt of living in a penthouse. You all know what a penthouse is, right? Usually if there is a tall building, it's on the very top floor. And also, I've always dreamt of living in a house or an apartment. Let's move on. Buying and leasing homes in Korea. Now you can say these days more people want to sign a lease or sign a lease contract. If you want to talk about 전세 in Korean, you can say sign a lease. Sign a lease contract. You are leasing a place, meaning you are renting a place, okay? If not, you can say, we are planning to buy a house in 2 years. In 2 years. Within 2 years, I'm planning to buy a house. What about this? 월세 is where you pay monthly rent. Sometimes people have a difficult time talking about 월세 and 전세 because it's a different system. So if you want to say, well, you live in a house and it's 월세. You can say 월세 is where you pay monthly rent. You pay rent every single month. What about 전세 then? 전세 is where you pay a large deposit. Okay, deposit is like a large amount of money that you pay up front in the beginning, right? And don't pay monthly rent. So that's the difference. 전세, you pay a large deposit and don't pay monthly rent. Okay, now let's take a quick look at some vocabulary related to, of course, our topic for the day, vocabulary and terms to keep in mind. Of course, we all know what lease is. When you want to talk about renting a place, especially 전세, you want to say lease. Lease, sign a lease contract, or you can say you are renting the house, leasing the house. Lump sum deposit. Lump sum means a large amount, lots of money. And deposit is the money you pay in advance, right? So lump sum deposit. Also rent. Now, deposit money and down payment. These are kind of similar, but deposit money is the money you pay in advance, and a down payment is Something very similar, but usually when you purchase something, you pay maybe 10% of something, 20% of something, and that is a down payment, okay? Quickly, you pay monthly rent every month. What about utility room? Utility room, simply put, is a place, usually in apartments or houses, where we do the laundry. Where there's the washing machine and the dryer and stuff. 다용도실, that's called a utility room. And also balcony. In Korean, we call it 베란다, which is from veranda, but balcony is used much more commonly. So in place of saying 베란다 or veranda, try using balcony. Lots of apartments have balconies next to the living room. Also garden or backyard, as we mentioned. These are outdoor areas. Quickly, landlord is the person that owns a place and rents it to you. The owner of the house or the apartment. 집주인, simply put, also tenant, is the people or the family that lives in the place. Roommate, housemate, we all know. Security guard, 경비 아저씨 or 경비원, we can call them. A doorman is a person that usually attends at the door, at the entrance of a building or even an office building or apartment. And finally, we often talk about apartments or one-bedroom apartments or studios, whether it's full option, full option, one room, right? Never say that. So if you want to talk about a place that is furnished, that has furniture and things that you need, call it a furnished apartment, never a full option, one room or an apartment. So keep these terms and vocab in mind, and let's move on. Now that we're done with our actual talk and expressions, let's move on to an idiom for the day. Of course, we are talking about types of homes, so I brought an idiom with the word house in it. It is be on the house. I'm sure many of you may know what this means, but here is a sample sentence. I walked into the restaurant as the 1,000th customer, so they gave me a bottle of wine on the house. They gave me a bottle of wine on the house. So what does it mean? Be on the house means in Korean 무료로 제공되는 서비스. 서비스로 무엇을 받았다라고 할 때 something was on the house. I got something on the house. So here is the definition. Something, or mainly food, I guess, at restaurants or bars that is provided free by the owner of the place. Okay, it's free of charge. Here's another sentence. We waited 20 minutes for a table, so a salad of our choice was on the house. We waited 20 minutes for a table, so a salad of our choice was on the house. Meaning, we waited 20 minutes, so the owner of the restaurant felt bad, so they gave us something for free. A salad on the house. A salad for free. So keep this idiom in mind. Be on the house.
Talk about where you live. What kind of home do you live in? How long have you lived there? Describe the physical structure of your home in detail. What is your dream house? If you could build your own home, how would you design it and construct it?
Currently, I live in an apartment alone in Seoul area. I used to live with people in suite that I really don't know about, so it was kind of dangerous and distracting in a way that I really wanted to move to this new apartment. And I'm very satisfied with this apartment because I can have my own room, bedroom, and kitchen and living room. From my bedroom, I can see the Changgye River flowing in the morning and evening with a cup of coffee. And my bedroom is big enough for a queen-size bed. And that's my favorite part about this apartment. If I can build a house, then I would build a house that looks like a full house in Korean drama, which is located behind the ocean and in front of the mountains, so I can take a walk with my family and puppy in the morning and evening and have more free time.
Now that was today's actual interview. Job well done and thank you. 신유원님 감사합니다. Let's take a look at what she said. First of all, she did talk about sharing a place with some other people, but now she lives on her own in an apartment. She also told us about what kind of house she would like to live in the future, her dream house, right? Now, she told us, from my bedroom, I can see the Cheonggye River, okay? Cheonggye stream would be the correct word, flowing in the morning and evening with a cup of coffee, and my bedroom is big enough. You can say my bedroom is spacious for a queen-sized bed. Remember, queen, king, double, sized. S-I-Z-E-D bed. You should always say that. So she's talking about her apartment. She's mentioned many things in detail, so wonderful job there. But keep in mind, it's not Cheonggye River, it's Cheonggye Stream, okay? Now, another one. I'm very satisfied. I'm very happy with this apartment. Why? Because I can have my own room. Right? Before she shared a room with others, and she says bedroom, kitchen, and living room. So wonderful job there. A few oopsies here and there. First of all, currently I live in an apartment alone in Seoul area. We did take a look at this. So how should we change it? It should either be in Seoul or in the Seoul area, right? So keep that in mind. You can say, currently I live in an apartment alone by myself in the Seoul area, right? In the Seoul area or in downtown Seoul. Or even simply just in Seoul, okay? When you want to say area, always add in the so-and-so area. And one more quick one. If I can build a house, she's talking about her dream house. If I can build a house, then I would build a house that looks like a full house in Korean drama, and she goes on talking about that. Let's quickly take a look what you can say. If I could, or if I can build a house, I would build a house that looks like the house. That specific house, we're talking about a house in the Korean drama, Full House, okay? Like the house in the Korean drama, Full House. So if you say, I want to live in a full house in the Korean drama, not many people will understand, okay? So you want to say, I want to live in a house that looks like the house in a certain drama, and then name of drama. So job well done, everyone. Try not to make the same mistakes, and that is a wrap for today's actual interview. Well, today I think we covered a lot, didn't we? The topic itself was quite simple, types of homes. So you might have thought apartment, house, villa, and so on, but we did cover a lot. The next time you have the opportunity to talk about the house that you live in, or perhaps to talk about your dream house, I hope you will practice the expressions we learned today and make use of them, all right? Keep all of them in mind. I'll be joining you back next time with another interesting topic. Next time, we'll talk about savings and investments. So, do you save money? Or how do you save money? Do you put it in the bank? Do you have a savings account? Or do you invest in property, real estate? Or do you invest in the stock market? Do you invest in funds or bonds and stocks and so forth? We'll talk about that next time. In the meantime, you are more than welcome to come to our homepage. Find your way over to www.ebse.co.kr and type in Chinyipoy Actual Speaking. Leave some messages, comments, questions. Okay, that is all for today, everyone. I'll catch you again soon. Bye for now.